Hi, I'm Eric McGhee, and I'm a policy fellow here at the Public Policy Institute of California, studying governance and elections. 2012 promises to be an interesting campaign season. We've got a couple of new reforms that we'll be trying out for the first time, and also some significant initiatives and important candidate races as well. I'm going to talk a little bit about the context for this election, the state's political complexion and political geography, and then talk about the changes to the system as well as the issues and candidates that will be on the ballot. California is a democratic state in terms of both its party registration and its presidential voting, and some other measures besides. This has largely been developing over the past 20 or 30 years, especially in the Bay Area and Los Angeles, which have grown significantly more democratic compared to the rest of the state. That has opened up a partisan geographic divide that didn't used to exist 30 or 40 years ago. Nonetheless, one of the most important changes that has been occurring over the same period of time is that both major parties have lost registrants as a share of total registration. And the decline to state or independent category has grown tremendously. In the last few election cycles, that trend has changed a little bit as the Democratic decline has leveled out, while Republicans have continued to lose registrants in both relative and absolute numbers. Now, it's not clear whether that's going to continue moving forward, or whether that's a temporary blip in the longer-term trends. But since the number of independents has continued to grow during the same period of time, it seems likely that independents will continue to grow as a category moving forward. Now, there's an important caveat there, which is that these independents are not necessarily the classic swing voters that people typically talk about. Most independents either lean to one party or the other, and in California, they mostly lean to the Democrats. So that helps explain how the state has both become more democratic over time, even as its number of independents has grown. California will be experimenting with a couple major changes to its elections this season. First, the state is using districts drawn by an independent commission for the first time. It used to be that the state legislature would draw congressional and state legislative districts every 10 years after the new census. But after a pair of initiatives passed by California voters in 2008 and 2010, that responsibility has now been handed to an independent commission instead. The commission has drawn districts that are a little more competitive than the old ones, at least on paper. And certainly they prompted a reshuffling among the state's political elite. There's going to be some prominent incumbents who are going to run against each other. And there's a very large number of open seats where no incumbent is running, particularly in the congressional plan, where the number of open seats could be the highest that we've seen in 20 years. The number of open seats will be a little bit less remarkable in the state legislative races because term limits always produce a lot of open seats there by forcing incumbents to retire. But nonetheless, the number of open seats in legislative races should be at or near record levels all the same. The state is also going to be using an open primary system for the first time for nominating its candidates. Previously, voters had to vote for the party to which they were registered, and only for candidates of that party. The only exception was independents who were often invited to participate in party primaries, but they would still have to vote only for candidates of that party. The new system, typically referred to as the top two system, allows voters to vote for any candidate for any office, and the two candidates who receive the most votes then move on to the fall election, even if they're from the same party. I think it's fair to say that supporters of these two reforms, both the primary reform and the redistricting reform, have hoped that it would end up electing more moderates to office who would be more willing to work across party lines as they served. The evidence for that is a little weak, however. It doesn't mean that we won't elect more such moderates to office as a result of these reforms, but I don't think we should expect a wholesale change from the status quo. This fall, there's going to be a number of candidates on the ballot. All of the state assembly, 20 of the 40 state senate, and all of the congressional districts will be on the ballot, as well as one of the U.S. Senate seats and, of course, the presidency. Nationally, there are a few signs that this election will be a slam dunk for either party. However, based both on recent polling and past performance, President Obama should do well in California, and if he doesn't, California will be the least of his problems. And so far, Senator Dianne Feinstein's prospects look good, though her polling numbers are a little lower this year than in her previous re-election efforts. The new redistricting plans, meanwhile, all predict similar partisan outcomes, but that doesn't mean that they'll all produce the same change from the status quo, because the status quo in each case is a little bit different. For the congressional plan, the old districts were so uncompetitive that as Democrats did better over the course of the last decade, they were unable to pick up new seats. The new plan will allow them to pick up those seats, and so a gain of anywhere from 2 to 5 seats for the Democrats would not be surprising. For the state assembly and the state senate, the key issue is always whether Democrats are going to be able to get to the 2/3 of the chamber they need to pass tax increases without any Republican support. Taking each plan as a whole, the odds of that outcome actually haven't changed that much. For the assembly, that's just because there isn't any change. For the Senate, however, the Democrats have actually underperformed under the old maps. In fact, it's not hard to imagine a scenario where they would have won a 2/3 majority already. So if the status quo were just maintained, we might expect the Democrats to pick up the seats that they need. The new maps do make that outcome even more likely, but only for the 20 seats that are up for election in 2012. The 20 that are up in 2014 are not as good for the Democrats. So by the time the whole plan plays itself out, there may not be much gain for the Democrats at all. There will also be a number of interesting initiatives on the ballot. In June, there will be a term limits reform that, if passed, would have the practical effect of allowing legislators to serve a little longer in the chamber to which they're elected. There will also, on the fall ballot, be a measure to ban payroll deductions for unions, which is a hotly contested and issue that repeatedly resurfaces in California politics. And there is currently scheduled to be a long-delayed water bond, though Governor Brown wants the measure to be further delayed or scaled back, so its status is a little uncertain. There's also a lot of discussion about 3 possible tax measures that would be on the ballot and would raise revenue for the state. None of them has qualified yet for the ballot, though it's likely that at least one of them will. And if any of them were to pass, it could alter the state's budget debate in important ways. In conclusion, I think it's easy to believe that every election is important when you're in the middle of it. Yet the argument for the importance of this particular election is especially strong. I've tried to highlight the issues and changes that I think make it important and interesting, and I hope that's provided some context for what promises to be a memorable election season. Thanks for listening.